Hi everyone, it's Henry here, and in this video we're going to take a look at the new Mk3 armour kit for the Space Marines from the Horus Heresy game. Now, Games Workshop sent us this kit through for review, and having painted many Horus Heresy miniatures over the years, I thought it'd be good fun to break it down a bit, have a look what's different with the new kit, compare and contrast, and also stick in a new recipe video to add to the 18 odd Legion ones we've got in our Heresy playlist anyway. And that's for that Emperor's Children model. I'd really fancy trying that colour out, and I'm glad I had an excuse to do it. So the new kit, very, very similar to the Mark 6 kit rather. And one thing I mucked up on the Mark 6 kit a lot, and nearly did with this Mark 3 kit. You can see here there's a couple of little locator lugs on the arm sockets, which just help the sets of arms sit correctly, so that when you drop in the bolter, which obviously has both hands moulded on it, they sit correctly. And the way the sprue joins to the torso is via those little plugs, so it's very easy just to clip them off, assuming that they are sprue, which is what I did. So just be conscious of that. And whilst you're only getting the 5 poses, just like the Mark 6 kit, and can keep messing that up, the Mark 6 kit, you can use all the different pairs of arms on all the different 5 torso and leg sets, so you can get plenty of variation across the squad. And personally, I think it's a really nice idea, keeping them the same poses so that it's easy for us to swap and mix and match, and hopefully that suggests that there's going to be more armor marks coming in the future to do that with. And for instance, the way it allows us to use the existing special weapons and heavy weapons kits, as well as that lovely little extra they've added, so you can use the Mark 6 arms, stick a van brace on. I know there's arguments that it's not accurate, for want of a better term, but these are very different to what we've seen before. And for me, this kit in particular is just cementing the fact that we're in Heresy 2nd edition now, and things are changing. The established look of things are changing. I'm a fan, but then I've had 10 plus years of Heresy, so I'm just quite looking forward to a change. And actually one of the biggies is what we're seeing here is the old Mark 3 helmet on the new Mark 3 kit. This is about my only, not dislike, but my only slight confusion or reservation was quite why they wanted to change the helmet, which I felt was so iconic, that wedge-shaped helmet for the Mark III, for the new ones, which for me still look a little bit too Mark II, although very cool. So I just tried a few of the different head kits out on them, as well as this Mark 7 lid, because I am itching to do a bad app project using the Heresy kits, and I was really keen to see how the Mark 7 helmet fitted in. And depending on the pose, they look better or worse. This one's a particularly squat pose, and I think it maybe makes the heads look a bit off, but the slightly more upright ones, I think they look great. But the heads from the older kits are definitely bigger, chonkier. The new kit one, it just seems a little bit more refined. The whole model is just more refined and crisper, and just feels like a real sort of contemporary sculpt, which is, for someone like myself, really, really wonderful. For someone who's got an existing army and is going to put these in, I'm not quite sure where they're going to sit on that, and I'd love to know in the comments, how you feel about it. But what I thought I'd do is take some of the new kits and apply a couple of the schemes that we have already done for the channel for our respective personal armies. So Andy's Sons of Horus army, and my White Scars army, so we can sort of look at them and compare and contrast them together. So I've taken Andy's scheme, which you've got some great videos for over on our YouTube as well as over on our Patreon. But on the YouTube, we put out how he's painted the Marines. I think we've put out how he's painted his Justarin, and then we've taken a video that was previously Patreon only, a nice long hour-long Contempt of Dreadnought sort of masterclass, and that's on YouTube as well. And equally, if you'd like to go and see how he's painted his characters, so Malaghurst, he did that lovely Justarin sort of Praetor model as well. They're all over on the Patreon. So I've tried to follow Andy's recipe as faithfully as possible. The biggest difference is that I don't have the green sky paint that he used to make his custom mix-up, but I had a colour called Skarsnik Green from Games Workshop, which I felt was pretty damn close. So I've just used that instead. And actually, I think they've come out pretty much, bang on. I thought, there's a slight difference in the colour, but on the table, I don't think you'd even notice it. But when it's one next to each other, I think you can tell there's a slight difference in the hue or the tone rather of the green. But both, I think, look lovely. And for me, this is becoming the sort of definitive Sons of Horus green. It seems to be, particularly with Heresy, there's no real specific colour for nearly any of the legions. Everyone's kind of got their own interpretation of them, and I think it's absolutely brilliant. Not only do I feel like it's a bit more realistic, for want of a better word, but I just think it makes it more interesting. It lets you make it your own. And whilst a lot of people are fans of trying to treat Heresy a bit more like a historical game, there's certain accuracies that people enjoy trying to represent on their miniatures or in the composition of their forces and all the rest of it. I do really like that there's still that large degree of individual takes on them. But you can see here, I think they look really, really nice together, the Mark 6 and the Mark 3. And as I say, I think this heralds in very much a new era of Heresy, albeit 18 months or whatever it is we're into the new edition. Now, speaking of the new edition, when they launched it, Games Workshop asked us to paint up an army for the launch. Myself and Andy chose the White Scars, and we've done some videos on this in the past if you want to check them out. But I painted up the box set, the Age of Darkness box set, and Andy painted up Jagatai Khan, the Primarch model, to go with it. And it was a very, very tight time frame on this project, so it really forced me into real army painting to get these sort of knocked out and looking cool, particularly en masse. I wanted them to be viewed as this big boxes worth of miniatures. And Heresy, on the whole, providing you don't go too vehicle heavy, generally you're getting tons of stuff on the table, and the games can look absolutely wonderful. So I've painted this Mark 3 up in exactly the same way that I've painted up the rest of that army, for which, again, in the Heresy playlist, there is a whole video dedicated to that recipe. I suppose the main difference with this is I had chosen, partly as an aesthetic choice, but also for expediency, I'd chosen to keep the majority of the trim on the original boxes worth of stuff white. I really like that utilitarian look, and it happened to be, say, slightly more efficient as well for painting. But on the Mark III, we're offered a bit more trim, and I thought, well, do you know what? They can represent sort of more veteran Marines, and there's no reason not to have a little bit more of the gold on there. So that sort of definitely gives it a different look. But I think it works very, very well. And whilst we've got him here next to his Mark 6 chum, and I haven't had time to build up the base, because as you can see, the bases are a little bit more involved on the ones we did for the launch. I've tried to match the colours pretty close. You can see that they look, again, just like the Sons of Horus, really, really lovely together. And here's some shots of him with a few more units, just so you can get an idea of that size and scale, with the Dread and with the Terminator. One of the things I was concerned about when we were getting the new Mark 6 and the new Mark 3, this better proportioned power armour, was, would it make the Terminator armour look a little bit weedy? And actually, I think it's fine. At the end of the day, the Marines inside is still the same height. So, if you I should have done a picture of it. If you stand these next to the Indomitus, the new Indomitus Mark Terminator armour, which we got with the release, the Leviathan release, and recently that new box, they're huge compared to these. And whilst that's cool, for me, maybe doesn't quite make sense, because, say, the Marine inside hasn't changed shape, so he's still kind of got a fit. His feet and his arms, his hands, things like that, they have to go in the right places, don't they? It's not like that Corpharum model where they've modelled it where you can see it's a smaller person inside a Terminator suit. So actually, yeah, I think the Cataphracti certainly still work well against these, which is really cool because it's such an iconic thing for Heresy, I think, Cataphracti armor. But yeah, looks lovely with the rest of the force. So yeah, I was thinking of selling this army. I've had some fun with it, don't get me wrong, but I was kind of thinking of selling it, shifting it on. But yeah, temptation is to maybe add these in. I don't know. We will see. But new scheme-wise, I really fancied having a go at some Emperor's Children. Whilst I really like the sort of royal purple that we see a lot of people do, for instance, on Ben, our Commission Chief's Emperor's Children army, and actually on the tutorial I've already done on the Emperor's Children for the Heresy playlist, there's this one piece of artwork from the Fulgrim Primarch's book, and I just think this colour is amazing. And there's some similar colours from the early Visions of Heresy or Collective Visions books as well. And I wanted to use this as inspiration, not a direct copy by any means, but just lean more into that magenta and pink side of things rather than the purple. So I'm starting off with a really strong pre-shade or pre-highlight here using Tamiya Flat White. I've thinned this about 3 drops to 4 drops of Tamiya X28 thinner to every drop of paint. I'm spraying about 25 psi, and I'm using a 0.4mm needle and nozzle there, and that's in one of our Harder and Steenbeck signature series Infinities. And when I say strong pre-shade, I mean I'm leaving the shadows really dark and making sure the highlight areas are really bright, and this is because colours like red and pink, they can really benefit from this kind of pre-shade. And I'm actually going to apply the colours almost in reverse. So you've just seen me apply the highest highlight colour there, which is Warlord Purple by Vallejo Game Air. I've had to thin that about 1:1, but with normal thinner. But you need to obviously check what your bottle's like and depending on your spraying situation. So sprayed that just onto the areas of brightest highlight. Then I'm going to spray on the main colour, which is Screamer Pink by Games Workshop. And the reason that I've done it this way around is I want the white underneath the brightest colour. Whereas if I'd sprayed the Screamer Pink on and then highlighted up, that Warlord Purple would have been going over the Screamer Pink, and it's not strong enough to get that really lovely, vibrant pink over the top. So we just work backwards with it. You take your time, doesn't take that long, and you can see here, I think it's already looking really nice, but I want to push the contrast just a little bit more. I'm not a fan of over use of contrast, particularly value contrast to the light and dark on a model, particularly Heresy models. I prefer mine to look a little bit more like those earlier Forge World takes on it, the sort of Phil Stashinskas, Mark Bedford military modelling inspired paint jobs, but obviously it's still a ludicrous colour, so it can have a little bit of fun with the contrast. So I'm spraying in here some Barak Nar Burgundy into the shadows, and this is just to give the shadows a bit more colour, but also just if I've gone a bit wide with any of my highlights, I can just trim them up there with the Barak Nar Burgundy, and I've thinned that one about 2 drops of thinner to paint because that's a base paint that's a little bit thicker. Once that's dry, I glossed it, I applied the decals, put a link up to the decals video there, and whilst the model was glossy, I decided to do some pin washing, or panel lining you might hear it called, and again I'll link up to a video dedicated to that technique, but essentially I've taken a very dark grey colour, this one's called Smoke by Absalom 502, and I'm just washing that into all the recesses, and this is an oil wash. Now, once that was dry, I gave the model a coat of ultra matte varnish by Ammo by Mig, and you can see already it just changes it an awful lot. Now we've got it sort of tidied up with a uniform finish across it, and every stage that we do from now on is going to reduce that level of sort of in-your-face contrast anyway on the armour, so it's always good to go maybe a little bit too far to start with. For the chipping colour on this, I just added, it was called Flesh Tone by Vallejo model colour, but you could use something like Cadian Flesh would be absolutely fine by Games Workshop, and I just mixed that in to the Warlord Purple just to lighten it up a little bit, so it's almost a sort of peachy colour, but I think it works really nicely. And then for chipping, I've chosen to use Dark Rust by Vallejo Panzer Aces, but you could use something like Rhinox Hide, it'd be absolutely fine. Dark Rust is just my go-to chipping colour. It's probably more by habit than deliberate choice, but it's not as effective on this colour of armour, but it's still important to have it in there. If you wanted to push the contrast further, you could use perhaps something more like a grey here rather than a brown for the chipping colour, but I just like that dark rust colour. I just haven't done too many, so I've just put fewer of those dark brown chips where the lighter ones are. And one of the things I really like on the Mark III armour is when you do the back of the leg different, because the idea with Mark III is it's up armoured Mark II where they sort of strap extra plates on. So you'll see on all of the 3 models I've done with here, I've left the back of the legs a different colour. And to highlight the black one, I've just sprayed some Eclipse Grey by scale 75 on there, just as a simple highlight before chipping it up like I would the rest of it. Now for the gold on the model, I want a nice warm gold, and because I'm army painting here, we rely on our old favourites or old faithful paints. For me, one of those is scale 75 Decayed Metal. This is the base coat I use for pretty much all my golds, bronzes, brass colours, things like that. Thinned it down ever so slightly on my palette, and then just go around the trim and whatnot that you want it. And then for the actual gold colour itself, the highlight, I've chosen Skullcrusher brass. I picked this one up recently from Games Workshop, and actually really, really like the colour of it. I'm just picking out the edges, the rivets, things like that. So still leaving lots of that decayed metal there in the recesses. And then once everything was dry, I'm going in with some more oil here, just to add a little bit of interest, a little bit of dirt and grime, not too much. And this is Raw Umber by Winsor Newton. It's an artist oil colour. Thin this with normal mineral spirits, so it's going to dry a little bit quicker. And just giving this a fairly liberal wash all over, but it is a thin wash, so it's not going to change the colour that much. And for instance, on the metal areas, I might reapply it a couple of times just to get that colour in there. But I am very, very happy with how this one's come out. I probably changed the eye lens colour. I went for the same thing I did on the white scars just to be nice and quick about it. But yeah, as a colour, big fan. I feel like it treads that line between when they were still loyal but a little bit obnoxious and all the rest of it, and you can see how easy it was for them to fall into that real over the top, just ridiculous colours. Particularly if we think back to sort of Rogue Trader in second edition, we used to see Emperor's Children in 40k and all these incredible like sort of pastel colours, these pinks, blues, greens, things like that. I think it'd be a lot of fun, but I think this works as a loyalist scheme, and that's the nice thing about using this Mark III. And if I'm honest, this Mark III with these new helmets, which I still glance at it and think, oh, it's Mark II. It's going to be really interesting to see if we get a Mark II plastic kit. My guess is that we're getting this Mark III kit, and perhaps we will now get add-ons for this, which will give us, say, despoilers and breaches and things like that, but I'm not sure, but that would be my guess. But as I mentioned at the top of the video, one of my biggest concerns about this new kit in the Mark VI was how is it going to make my old Heresy miniatures look. And I love them. I was into Heresy from the very, very beginning. It happened to coincide. The first Horus Rising novel came out as I was getting back into the hobby. The miniatures followed a few years later. And I've been heavily involved in the Heresy painting scene since day dot, really. So I've painted an awful lot of them, and I love them. I adore the Heresy. I adore the look of the Heresy armour and stuff. But I'm also someone who enjoys updates and modernisation of the miniature process, whether that's sculpting or production or whatever. And say these Mark VI, and particularly these new Mark III, they do feel much more modern. They're crisp. The level of detail on them is it's lovely. They're an absolute joy to paint, these models. Even all the joints have got these weird little extra straps, which I guess is representing that extra armour being strapped on. So if you wanted to, you could spend a little extra time and maybe do that, strap a different colour to the ribbing that's underneath it. For me, for army painting, which is what I've done on these three miniatures, I've just done it black and highlighted it like it was the ribbing. But yeah, I think they're beautiful, but for me, I can't have these in the same army now as my old Mark IV, like we're seeing the Thousand Suns there, or the old Mark III, like we're seeing on that Death Guard heavy flamer dude. For me, there's too much of a disconnect now, and yeah, I don't really know where that leaves me with it. Do I want to start a whole new army? Do I want to do what? I'm really not sure, but I'd really be interested to know from those of you that collect and paint Heresy stuff whether that difference in scale, because it's quite considerable, and not just scale, but the execution of it. As I said, they feel a little bit more slim isn't the right word, and delicate isn't necessarily the right word either, but everything's just a little bit crisper. Things like the rim around the shoulder pad, it's thinner, it's sharper, The heads, the helmets, they will be a completely different style, but again, they're crisper, they're sharper, they're a bit smaller. It's really interesting. But either way, I think if you have an old Heresy army with the old Marines in it, it'll still look absolutely incredible. And I think if you have a new one, it'll look absolutely incredible. Just for me, I'm not too sure on mixing the two anymore, but I'd love to hear your thoughts down in the comments. So yeah, this was just a sort of quick recipe video, and also my thoughts on this amazing, in my opinion, amazing new kit, possibly my favourite Space Marine kit they've ever done. Certainly close to. And for next week, I'm going to do a normal sort of standard classic Heresy tutorial video on a scheme I've wanted to do for ages, and I was waiting and hoping we were going to get a Mark II or Mark III kit in plastic for me to have a go on. And that is the pre-Heresy World Eaters, known as the Warhounds. So if you've enjoyed the video, hit the like button, hit subscribe if you're not already. Thanks ever so much for your support that you give us over here, but particularly over on Patreon. And I'll see you next time. If you've liked any of the models in this video and you fancy having an army of them yourself, but perhaps you don't have the time or wherewithal to get it done, consider dropping us an email at commissions@cultofpaint.com, and maybe Ben can sort you out.